I'm charged with kicking this event off this morning, and so first of all, I want to thank all of you for being here to support Crystal in this campaign, and I want to thank Governor Perry for being here. I'd like to know. I've had a chance to meet Governor Perry several times over the last year and a half, and I can tell you he's a great man and a very genuine man, and he has been a great help to our Senate caucus, traveling the state, helping candidates. He's had an event last night for one of our candidates, as well as for Marionette Miller Meeks. So he has been traveling the state and is very, very much appreciated. Thank you very much. We have a tremendous, I guess before we start that, I want to introduce just a few other people that are here with us today. People either elected officials or running for office. First of all, I'd introduce Zach Nunn. He is a state house candidate. He's running for the state house in this district, the western part of the district Crystal's running in. We have Pat Payton.
You have to step out.
Pat Payton is running for the house on the eastern part of this district.
Yes.
We have Cheryl Wisnan. She is the co-chair.
Yeah.
Co-chair of the Polk County Republicans. And then Kevin McLaughlin is our former chair of the Polk County Republicans. So
back from where the action.
But we have a tremendous opportunity. Did I miss one?
Oh, Mary.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mary came in late. Yep. Mary Moses. Our state auditor running for our first re-election, so up from the Ames area. So sorry about that, Mary. Well, we have a tremendous opportunity this fall to do something that's only been done twice in the last 50 years, and that is have complete Republican control at our state capitol. Hasn't been done in 16 years, or 18 years, since 1996. We feel very good about the governor's chances in re-election. We feel very good about the House keeping their majority. And really, all eyes, once again, are on the state Senate to see if we can get over that hump and bring a Republican majority to the state Senate. We know that's going to be the battleground. We know that's where all the Democrat money is going to go. And so we're doing everything we can to combat that and bring a majority to the Senate. We're working very hard. And we know that the majority in the Senate is going to come through this Senate district, Senate District 15. There's no doubt in my mind that whoever wins this seat will be the party in the majority come this fall. And so, not to put any undue pressure on Crystal, and one of my roles in the Senate is as the Republican whip, which is the #2 position in leadership. And in that role, part of that responsibility is to recruit, identify candidates, and then support and oversee their campaigns as they go forward. And I cannot tell you how excited we are to have Crystal as our candidate in Senate District 15. She is a great person. She's a very hard worker. She's got a great background for this. And I think just as important, she has the full buy-in and support of her family. I think Governor Perry could tell you, any other elected could tell you, you don't do this unless you have the full support of your family. And Crystal has that. They're out door knocking together as a family, and we really appreciate that. So as we get going, we're going to have a few people speak, and at this time I would just like to introduce Crystal Bruntz to speak for a while. She's a great candidate. We're so excited to have you. We appreciate your hard work.
I'll keep my remarks brief for me, because my husband laughs at me. I'm just excited that everybody could be here this morning. Thanks, Jack, for those kind words. No pressure, though, right? I also just want to thank the folks that showed up and that have worked hard for my campaign. Several of them are here already. I have my treasurer, some good friends from Baxter, and just some others who are working hard to get me through this. And of course, my family is here with me. And they do spend a lot of time with me door knocking. I think we joke this is probably the most time we've spent together in a long time. And we're still together, so that's good. We made it through the primary, and now we're headed for the general. And I think, as we go out door knocking, we hear what people are saying. As we go up to a door, we say it's usually going to be one of three things. They're either going to be apathetic, they're going to be angry, or they're going to be really aware of what's going on. So between those three things, the apathetic voters, we're out there trying to talk to them, we're trying to get them excited about this, and also to understand why they might be apathetic. Some people have just given up, others just haven't had the time to get involved. Some of them, too, as we talk to them, maybe it's time for them to get involved, and every once in a while, you'll get one of them to say that to you. Some of them are angry, and I he actually took the brunt of the most angry ones so far. I think we have a contest going out there. But a lot of times we're not really sure why they're angry. So sometimes we get to talk to them. Sometimes we can talk them through that. A lot of that anger is because of the frustration that they have. The frustration with how things are being led in the country or at the state level. Then we also have those voters, which are the exciting ones for us, and we get to talk to them. They're the voters that are aware of what's going on. So as we're out talking to them, we get to then participate with them in a conversation about their ideas. A lot of them have great ideas. The problem is they just don't know how to share the ideas. So hopefully through me, I can start to share those ideas and start to make some changes in the state. The other thing I hear too from those aware voters are their concerns about where the country is headed. And I know, I can hear some of the concerns for Governor Perry's state with the illegal immigration that's coming through. That is even resounding up here in Iowa. So what we think might be a national concern really is a concern for Iowa. The other thing, a lot of those aware voters talk about is the future. They have kids or they have grandkids. They want good people in office that can make a difference for them. And so as we go out, we're going to continue to talk to those types of voters. We're going to continue to try to attract all three of those types of voters to our party, as well as get through this race. And as Jack said, this could be the seat that does make a difference in the fall for getting that majority in the Senate. So I just can't say how much I appreciate your support in this.
Are you taking questions?
I guess I can take questions.
I was, well, first of all, I'm in sales, and to my astonishment, my own Rotary Club has banned political candidates this session. They don't trust Democrats and they don't believe Republicans. So that's where you're starting, and that's why people are probably angry when you come to the door. Number two, I was actually inspired when you said that taxes are one of your principal themes, or they're most important to you. Are you familiar with House File 3, the optional flat tax that the House passed a year ago, that's sitting in the House now waiting for a Republican majority?
No, I'm not.
In the Senate? Okay. Something to think about when you get there.
Yep.
But it's an optional flat tax. You can
Oh,
file
flat
with all
tax
your,
yeah.
for the state of Iowa,
Yeah.
you can file with all your deductions, or you can file at a new flat rate, and I believe it's 4.5%. So it would be a huge advantage for us, because for a lot of people it would be a discount of approximately 50% in the maximum tax rate that we pay today. Thank you.
One more person I would like to thank too is Dean Lauterbach, because he was one of my sponsors for this event. So we just want to give a big thanks to him. And then I'm going to put there, and I'm going to turn it over to Simon, to the governor.
Okay. Good morning.
Morning.
Morning. I am an afternoon guy for a reason. So thankfully the coffee's good. So I've been asked to introduce the governor of Texas, which seems a little strange because we should all know him. But so I thought I'd try and come up with a few things that we didn't know. His name is actually James. James Richard Perry. I can almost hear his parents, can you? And, really? Yeah. And so I thought that he's actually one of the few that I get in that doesn't try and wriggle on tough questions. But I thought if he ever does, I might use that on you. Very cool. Yeah, James Richard Perry. That he's a fifth-generation Texan. He started life on a tenant farm in West Texas. He's an Aggie. He's actually the first governor to have graduated Texas A&M. The first governor of Texas to graduate Texas A&M. What else is he? He's an Eagle Scout. He was in the Air Force, so he served our nation. For that, we're very grateful. And this is really interesting to me, because when I have, obviously in the WHO radio studio, every kind of 4 years we get a procession of politicians that are seeking some office or other. I'm not quite sure which one it is. And after I've had them in 2 or 3 times, we kind of push the politics to one side. And we try and get to know them as individuals. So we ask about what it was like growing up, what their first job was. And I will never forget asking this man to describe the moment, the first moment he laid eyes on his wife, Anita. I am not exaggerating. It's like somebody turned a light on.
That's why she's co-chair of the party.
His face lit up like you would not believe when he started talking about Anita. The other thing about Governor Perry is it usually takes him about 90 seconds to start selling Texas, so we're going to time him today. Doesn't matter what we're talking about, in about 90 seconds he'll start selling Texas. And frankly, his love of his state is only equaled by his very clear love of this nation. Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Rick Perry.
Crystal, thank you. Thanks for caring about your state and your country enough to put yourself in this process. It's not an easy process, as many of you know. When you were sharing your experience of knocking on doors, it reminded me of something I did as a young man. I was 19, the summer of 1969. I was between my freshman and sophomore year, and I needed a little help paying my way to college, and I really, really wanted a car. So I went to work for Southwestern Book Company in Nashville, Tennessee. Some of you probably know kids in college that have worked for them, and they sent me off to learn how to sell door to door. And then I went to a little town called Festus, Missouri, and I stayed there for the summer of '69. And I knocked on a lot of doors. And it is one of the great experiences in life to knock on a door at 8 o'clock in the morning. They are not particularly wanting to see you. So to sell yourself and to sell your vision for Iowa is a great thing. And that's really what I'm intrigued with. Terry and I have been talking to each other for some time. When I think I was the Republican governor, the chairman of the RGA, back when Terry was being recruited to come back in to recycle Terry Branstad, if you will. And I went back and looked at the record that he had as a governor in the late 90s. I think is when he left.
That's right.
90, probably 98, 99. And the unemployment rate in this state was down like 3.2%. And it was the mid-90s, the last time you had a Republican-controlled House, Senate, and governorship, right? So there's some connections here. There's some things to look back on, and to why were things like that in the mid-90s? And I will suggest to you one of the reasons is because you had men and women in office that truly believed in keeping taxes as low as possible, a regulatory climate that's fair, predictable, a legal system that doesn't allow for oversuing, and accountable public school. Most of you can give that speech because you've heard me talk about it so much, because that's exactly what I will suggest to you is the foundation to make Iowa an even more competitive state than it is today. And one of the reasons is because you still have one of your chambers that does not believe in that as much as the other chamber does. My point is that the red state policies work, and you have to look no further. How are we doing on time? Are we 90 seconds, Jeff? Yeah. You have to look no further than my home state to see how that's played out. I've been governor long enough that the policies that we put in place are now mature. They're cured, if you will. They have come to the fullness of time. We passed the most sweeping tort reform in the nation in 2003, and it's the first time in Texas history, well, back that up, first time since 1870s that there was a Republican-controlled House, Senate, governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker. It was in 2003. Most people think Texas, is a Republican state. It actually wasn't. It's a conservative state, but the trial lawyers and the special interest had really infiltrated the state's legislative process from the 80s through the 90s. And as a matter of fact, the Wall Street Journal called Texas, this is their descriptive term, they called it a litigation hellhole. So in 2003, the first time in a very, very long time, 1870 through 2003, there was Republican-controlled House and Senate, and the governor, lieutenant governor. The leadership was Republican, and we addressed tax issues. We addressed the regulatory climate to make it fair and predictable. Nothing is more important to businessmen and women to know that the predictability. Jordan and I were talking about how, and your company, Congo, how they are impacted by federal regulations. But it's also true at the state level as well, that predictability and stability of those, you don't change the rules in the middle of the game. That is very disheartening and very corrosive to economic development. So all of that said, the reason that I'm here and I'm helping, and I don't just go to Iowa. I guess there's some cynical people that think, oh, he just comes to Iowa. No, I go to New Hampshire and South Carolina too. But also North Carolina, Florida, California, and Illinois, and Connecticut, and New Jersey, and other states. I go and I have the same conversation. A lot of times I'm recruiting businesses. I told Terry, I said, I don't come up here. I go fish where the fish are on economic development recruitment. So it's easier to go recruit out of California and Illinois than it is Iowa. But this state's really important from the standpoint of another example of how thoughtful tax, regulatory, legal, and education policies put into place can make this state very, very competitive again. You're already headed in that direction, but you get that next house. And let me share with you it's anecdotal, but I think it makes my point. In 2003, the Speaker of the Texas House for a decade was a Democrat. He was a very loyal to his supporters, the trial lawyers, the special interest, and tort reform was not going to be passed. No, there was going to be no relief from the oversuing that was going on. And in 2003, we had a Republican speaker. In that session, we passed the most sweeping tort reform in the nation. Less than a decade later, there were more than 30,000 additional licensed physicians registered in the state of Texas. 30,000. Now let me tell you what that meant to people in the areas of the state that had rationed health care before. Because that's basically what the suing of these doctors had rationed areas of the state. For instance, if you were a pregnant female along the Rio Grande, you had to leave most of those counties to go find the type of prenatal care that you needed. If your child fell off a bicycle and they had a closed head injury, you had to drive for hours to get to a neurosurgeon. That's changed. That's changed substantially. So it's not just about economics. It's about people's lives. And that's why I think it's so important to elect Crystal to maintain the Republican seats, to win those seats, to bring Iowa Senate into parallel, if you will, with the House, with Terry, and at that particular point in time, I'm kind of like, why don't you go to 0?
Well, I got an answer for that, but we'll let you speak.
But my point is at that particular point in time, you could start relieving the pressure of over taxation, over litigation. You can have the stability in the regulatory climate. You can have those accountable public schools policies put into place. You know, we did things like charter schools, and we had incentive pay for our teachers, and we now last year we were tied for 3rd highest graduation rates in America, and we went up another 1.5% to 88%. 88% is the graduation rate in Texas today. I mean, we are on a trajectory, and when you look at what's happening on the reputation of the state nationally from a job creation standpoint, 35% of all the private sector jobs created in America since I've been governor has been in Texas. Now think about that for a minute. 1 in 12 individuals in this country live inside the boundaries of Texas. Yet over 1/3 of all the new private sector jobs created in America were in that state. It's a stunning number. And there's 1,000+ people a day move to the state. And my point is, it can happen anywhere, but I mean, the growth that occurs, Texas passed per capita wealth of California. I want to say, well, sometime in the last years. That's a powerful message. Texas became the #1. You know, we've been the #1 exporting state in total export dollars for the last 12 years. But last year we became the #1 high-tech exporting state, passing up California and the fabled Silicon Valley. And that's what can happen in a state. I think that's what Crystal, that's what Brian Schmidt, you know, that's what the other men and women who are running for the Senate are really focused on. How do we make this state more competitive? Because at the end of the day, the philosophy our founding fathers talked about in that 10th Amendment was that the federal government needs to do these enumerated items. Everything else is going to be reserved for the states, for the individuals. And they enumerate very clearly what those responsibilities that the federal government is supposed to be involved with. You know, and the tragedy from my perspective as the governor of the state where they are failing miserably at one of those enumerated responsibilities is border security. And that's one of the things the federal government is supposed to be doing. They're not supposed to be telling you how to run your education department here, how to educate your children. They're not supposed to be telling you how to deliver health care, but they are. And so we're in this real conundrum. And, you know, I think maybe that's one of the reasons people are not particularly happy with those that aren't happy, I'll say, is that they're seeing a dysfunctional government all too often out of Washington. And we all get painted with the same brush a bit. But it became apparent to me after meeting with the president that I wanted to give him some time after that to see if he would respond in an appropriate way to work with Congress or unilaterally. And the president could unilaterally have sent the needed security measures, both boots on the ground, technology, etc., to help us secure the border, to stop this amazing wave of individuals that are coming into our country. And I just want to share with you a bit about we saw a lot of focus on these unaccompanied minors. And that is a humanitarian crisis. It is an incredibly sad state of affairs that people would put their children unaccompanied on top of a train or on a bus where they are exposed to being abused, misused, recruited into these transnational gangs, and go on a 1,500 to 1,800 mile trip. Just, I don't understand that, but it was reality. But that was a substantial minor amount, less than 20% of the flow back in July. And we'd seen this for 2 years. We'd seen this issue for 2 years. As a matter of fact, we flagged it and shared it with the president that in May of 2012, a letter went to him and to Homeland Security to clearly say these kids are coming and they're walking across coming across the river and turning themselves in, and we're having to deal with it. So this was not a shock to the administration at all. And again, I can't get the president's mind. I'm not going to do that. I just have to deal with results, and I have to deal with reality. And the fact is, they were coming, and those numbers are exploding as we told them they would do. We didn't address this, and there were ways to address it, both diplomatically in those countries and otherwise, but there was no action on it. So it's the 80+% of the individuals who are coming in, who we don't know who they are either, but we do know that there is a very substantial crime wave that has occurred by individuals who we know come into the state of Texas illegally. The numbers are pretty stunning. Individuals who have been apprehended, booked into Texas county jails since September of 2008, over 200,000. And these are crimes that are everything from homicides to sexual assaults. I'll give you 2 examples. Just last week, Border Patrol agent was killed in front of his family while they were out fishing in Willacy County, which is just north of Brownsville in the border, by 2 individuals, one of which I believe had been deported multiple times. The other had a criminal record as well, both of them illegally in our country. And 6 weeks prior to that, a individual molested a 9-year-old girl stuck in her house. Now this is in Parker County. This is just west of Fort Worth. And my point with that is that there's a point in time where you basically say, if the federal government's not going to do its duty and help us secure that border, then we have to do it. And that was the real catalyst to announce that National Guard troops were going to be sent to the border. So, I'm an eternal optimist. I really hope that Washington, when they dealt with the VA, the VA was big enough of a scandal that the Congress dealt with. I felt comfortable. Well, I won't say comfortable. I had hope that they would see this issue of border security as just as much of a scandal and would deal with it from the standpoint of legislatively directing either Homeland Security, the DOD, all the different border security oriented agencies to deal with this issue. And they took a 5-week vacation. I know one thing. The drug cartels and the transnational gangs did not take a vacation. And that's the reason, again, that we're surge with the Texas Ranger Recon teams, with our Department of Public Safety, with our Parks and Wildlife wardens. The National Guard is both aviation assets, and as we're starting to put the Guard interspersed between these on the border. And working with the Border Patrol, Border Patrol's really good, hard-working people. They just, I think the leadership at the top. It's not unlike the VA, and I don't want to get too cross-current here, but the issue with the VA in this country is not the men and women that are working in the VA hospital. It's the leadership. The people at the top were the problem. And so my point with sharing that with you is that this isn't just a Texas problem. I mean, there are individuals who are penetrating the southern border with the United States and Mexico that aren't stopping in Texas. And this is a national issue. We've seen record high numbers of individuals apprehended from countries that have very close ties to terrorist organizations, like Syria, like Pakistan, like Afghanistan. And I'll wrap up this last example. In far west Texas, within the month, 3 individuals from Ukraine were apprehended. So the border is porous. There are a lot of people, I mean, these are the ones that we're apprehending. Somewhere between 1 in 3 and 1 in 4 is what the estimate is. If you apprehend this many, they're either 3 or 4 times that we're not. So securing this border is a very, very important role of government, federal government. We're going to do everything that we can to secure that border with our resources in Texas. And I hope that all of you, both directly and indirectly, will impress upon your elected officials why that's important to the people of Iowa. Because it is. It's not just a Texas problem. This is a national issue that we have to address. So, I'm excited about what's going to happen here between now and November. And it's not just about Crystal. It's also about your United States Senate race. And if we are going to have that real focus on border security and respecting the 10th Amendment, I think the best send Joni Ernst. Because I mean, to me, Iowa's got this great opportunity to send some really powerful messages, both nationally and statewide, in that we're open for business, and we're going to send people who are going to engage in getting this country back on track, get this country back working. You know, the tax side of things at the federal level, and again, I don't want to get too far afield here, but putting policies into place to make this country more competitive. Whether it's you know, opening up the XL pipeline, you know, we should be so much of an all of the above energy strategy in this country, and we've got you know, this president's blocking what I consider to be one of the, you know, really powerful job creation and energy security opportunities in the country. So Joni can help greatly. That may be the one race that makes the difference between whether or not Harry Reid, who thinks it's more important for Senate to go home than to stay and to get something done on our border, whether he's the majority leader or not. I'm for making him the minority leader. So anyway, Crystal, I'm proud of you and your family for the sacrifice that you're making to serve. And, Iowa has a great opportunity between now and the 4th of November to really send some powerful messages. And that's why I'm here. I want to help. I want to help be a part of that. And hopefully in North Carolina, Tom Tillis can win that Senate race up there. And you look across the country, we're going to be in Colorado working to help an individual up there. I mean, there's just some great races across our Louisiana's got a competitive race of which a Republican can beat a a Democrat who's going to, fairly well follow the lead of Harry Reid and Barack Obama. And I just think, I've spent enough time in Iowa now to know that I don't think they want to follow Barack Obama and Harry Reid. I think there's a better track, and Iowans, I think are going to really reflect that in this election. So you're going to do well. I think we're going to open it up for some questions.
I have a question. Governor, first of all, thank you for coming today. And thank you for all your treks across Iowa in the last few weeks. I appreciate that. You know, one thing that we don't talk a lot about here is leadership. And when you did what you did on the border, which is one of the many things you do in leadership, we talk a lot about Governor Branstad and Kim Reynolds and the things they do in leadership. What do you think is the underlying issue that makes somebody a great leader? You obviously have demonstrated it yourself, and there are people like Crystal that are just starting out in this Senate race, and who knows where she'll end up, probably governor or president or something along those lines. But I do think that's smart. I mean, she's just getting started, but she's a leader in her profession. So would you be so kind as to talk a little bit about leadership and those qualities that are lacking, shall we say, in our president right now?
I think people who are leaders know what they believe in. They have had life's experiences that solidify those beliefs. You and I don't know each other that well. I know your background. I know the educational preparation from an accountant's standpoint, knowing how to make the books balance, and then the company that you work with, and their contribution to creating jobs in the state, and they understand tax, regulatory, legal, and skilled workforce, those foundational issues, the K and the G in that company, and it goes through the fiber of that company. And in the HR business, which he's engaged with, that's reflected. So, I'm not gonna try to get into the president's mind. I don't think that's a particularly good exercise. But what I have to deal with the results, and I see the results. And I don't know whether the president is not confident. Now, my instinct is that when you have not ever run anything, and you have not been, you do not have the life's experiences of actually operating and having to make decisions, having to bring people together to negotiate, that may be some of the president's challenge, is he just has never had those life's experiences. One of the reasons I was excited that Terry Branstad was going to leave a fairly comfortable place in life and to come back and be a governor again was because he had that 16 years of experience. He knew how to get a deal. Now, he may not have got a full loaf, but a half a loaf's better than no loaf. And he moved Iowa in a good direction when he was there before, and he's moving Iowa in a good direction again. He just needs some help in the Senate to be able to have a tax policy, to be able to put the tax policies into place that will make Iowa an even more progressive place. When I talk about progressive, I'm talking about progressive in the sense of taxes and regulations and legal system, moving it upward from a job creation standpoint. So leadership's about life's experiences. Leadership's more importantly though about knowing what you believe in, and not on the job training, from the standpoint of knowing what you sitting down and going through the process of just having a conversation with yourself, people you know and trust, love, about here's what I believe in, here are the principles that guide me. I actually did this in the late 90s, and if you go to work at the governor's office in Texas today, you actually get a one-pager that says, here's what I believe in. Not that everybody has to be a robot, but the people of Texas know, here's what I believe in. The people who work with me know, here's what I believe in. So, whether you're in the communication shop, your constituency services, you're in the legal office, or you're in the legislative office, and you get confronted with a set of challenges, or a challenge, there's actually a document, and go, well, here's what this guy believes in. Government that is closest to the people governs best. And that list of principles that I believe in. So I'm not sure that document is been written at the White House.
But is it updated every so often for you, or are those your core principles?
Those are pretty core principles, and they don't change. So I mean, they haven't changed for 14 years, and they've served me well. That's not to say they're right for everyone. I want to veer off into the whole 10th Amendment conversation, and we were talking about this over that Jordan and I actually were talking about that. We're a very diverse country, and we're diverse economically, we're diverse geographically, we're diverse ethnically. I mean, we're a very diverse country, and the idea that Washington can make policies that comfortably fit across this country is just, it's pretty far-fetched when you think about it. Now, they may browbeat us and make us all fit into that little square box, but some of us are round pegs, and it's just uncomfortable. And you think about it, whether it's economic policies, whether it's educational policies, whether it's transportation policies, whether it's social policies, we're a really diverse people. And if Washington would respect the 10th Amendment and allow the states to make a substantial more of those decisions, I think the country not only would be happier, I think would be more functional. And I'm a big believer that we were talking about the minimum wage. How can you force a federal minimum wage and let that somehow or another be fair across the country? Just on its face of thinking about all of the differences in cost of living. And it's just, now if Iowa wants to decide a minimum wage in Iowa, that ought to be Iowa's choice. But to force that federally upon the businessmen and women doesn't make sense to me. So it's one of the reasons Marinette, Meeks and I were talking about this yesterday, is she's hopefully going to go to Congress, and that Washington really have a deep conversation about respecting the Constitution and that 10th Amendment Bill of Rights, because until we do that, I think you're still going to be knocking on doors and people are not going to be happy. Yes, sir.
We're facing new challenges in the Middle East. That lack of leadership that we're all suffering from in Washington is creating new problems for us. As an historian, and having been trained as a philosopher on 2 continents, a lot of people think that you got to have a strong military. The way I was trained, your first line of defense is a population, a citizenry that has something worth defending. People who don't have something worth defending will not fight, a la Western Europe. And so I sat and listened to a would-be presidential candidate last Thursday who described an optional flat tax that would put, I mean, it was flawed. He was making a big mistake, in my opinion, as a Steve Forbes friend and devotee. I spotted it right away. But do you have any thoughts about changes to our tax code? Is there anything that you would want to highlight at this point? I mean, you're at zero because you have an energy industry that is so productive for you, as I understand it. But I think that we have so many choices in the United States. You can go downstairs and have 40 different kinds of soup to choose from on the counter or the shelf. But when it comes to paying your tax, it's my way or the highway here in America. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts about that.
Number of things I want to address that you just brought up. One, the question you asked about. I am if you'll recall, I laid out a flat tax proposal, basically 20% flat tax, and get away with most of this. I am an adherent to Steve Forbes as well.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, Steve helped me develop that 3 years ago. And I still think that is a conversation this country needs to have. Obviously, we have allowed our corporate taxes to become the highest in the world. That is very, people ask about why are we driving these corporations offshore. I don't think it's because they want to go live in another country, that they think another country is actually a better place to live. They're doing it for tax purposes. They're doing it for their bottom line. So we need to address that. I want to make one little correction for you, and this is a very easily misconceived perception about the state of Texas. One of the reasons that we are successful, or the only reason that we are successful, correct that, is not because we have thoughtfully produced our natural resources. As a matter of fact, I would suggest to you New York State and California could be substantially more economically successful if they had produced their natural resources in the southern part of New York. They obviously have the same Marcellus Shale formation as northern Pennsylvania, and they choose not to do that. California has a substantial amount of natural resources that they choose not to produce, and that's, remember the old 10th Amendment? That's their choice. But they just need to respect that and say, we choose to have these higher taxes and these more onerous regulations. But in 1984, which was right at the peak of the last oil boom, if you will, $30 oil. The oil and gas industry, the mining industry, made up about 14% of the gross state product in Texas. Pretty close to the gross state product. And then we fell off a cliff, and for almost a decade, Texas was economically in a hole. In the 90s, we started back up and pretty much stayed on a trajectory up, had a little bump in 2001, 2002, and then we've been on an upward trajectory since. Think about what's happened since 1984 to present. 2012 is probably about the last numbers that we have on gross state product that are, we have found incredible amounts of gas. I mean, just stunning amounts of natural gas have been discovered. Oil is over 3 times, and we found a substantial amount of it more than what we had, but the price is now over 3 times more than what it was in 1984. And the gross state product of Texas of mining oil and gas is still about 14%. What that tells you is the rest of the economy expanded at an extraordinary rate. We're the #1 high-tech exporting state in the nation.
Yep.
grew by over 5 million people since 2000 have moved into the state. You know, interestingly, there are people who say you have to choose either the environment or job creation. Matter of fact, you're probably seeing some ads on TV by a guy who thinks that. With the next gen or who, that's Tom Steyer, right? I think he kind of makes, I don't know whether he makes that argument or not, I'm not going to speak for him, but that's the perception I get. You either got to pick this or this. During the period of time that I've been governor, population has grown by over 5 million people. We led the nation in job creation. Nobody else even close. Our job creation was 3 times what the largest states were during that period of time. And we lowered the nitrogen oxide levels by 62%, and we lowered the ozone levels by 23% during that period of time. They are not mutually exclusive. You can create wealth, you can create jobs, you can improve the quality of life, and you can improve the environment at the same time. Part of that is because we were an all-of-the-above energy strategy.
May I restate that question then? Everything about Steve Forbes' proposals for reforms pushes money back into the hands of individuals, families, and businesses.
Yes, sir.
Because the stronger we are as
Yes, sir.
individuals, families, and businesses, the stronger America is,
That is
and the more we
principle.
have that's worth fighting to preserve.
That is a principle.
And could I ask you then to compare the per capita income in Texas, let's say, versus the national average, if you're familiar with it? Because it seems to me you are doing a better job growing your economy, which means you're pushing money back into the hands of individuals, families, and businesses. And that's what attracted me to your,
Yes, sir.
and in addition to what you did on the border, I thought that was, and I'd like to ask you one favor. This is a speech. When the president gets off his plane, would you step back about 20 feet so that he has to walk to meet you? Because that's a powerful message.
I respect the President of the United States in that. I'll stand where they ask me to stand, as I did with George Bush and as I will with this president. But the point is,
Okay, thank you.
that this issue about putting money back in the hands of the private sector is so powerful. Let me share with you what all too often our team doesn't talk about enough, but it's the results of those policies. And in 2001, I've been governor for a short period of time. We got the phone call that Boeing was considering Dallas-Fort Worth as the headquarters for their corporate headquarters. It wasn't but about 165 jobs. This is a big deal because of the cachet of the Boeing name. The other city that was in the run was Chicago. Well, we all got all spun up and went up to Fort Worth and made a little presentation. And what we discovered is that we weren't very good at economic development at the state level. The agency that was in charge of economic development was very cumbersome. It had a 9-member board, and it was like trying to turn a big ship. It was very slow. It wasn't very flexible. We didn't have any incentive programs to go sit down and say, if you'll do this and create this many jobs, we didn't have any of that. Long story short, they picked Chicago. And the summer of '01, I asked our economic development team to gather up, and we had a conversation about, we either need to figure out how to do this, or we need to completely get out of the economic development business, just get rid of that agency and save the money. And we chose to really engage. So we collapsed, well, that following legislative session, which was in '03, because we only meet every other year for 140 days, which is that's a whole other issue. The less time legislators spend in session.
No, you're okay now.
It has on the citizens. That's a whole other. But in 2003, we came back and we did a multitude of things. Now remember, what happened in 2003? In Texas. Remember? First time since Reconstruction.
Sweeping tax reform.
Yeah, and tort reform.
Tort
and
reform,
because
excuse me.
we had Republican leadership for the first time in 150 plus years. So we came back in, and we had men and women who were, I'm going to say, in line with that philosophy that we collapsed that agency, did away with it. We took the mechanism and installed it in the governor's office as a trustee agency. There was an individual who, when we got ready to do something, we just picked up the phone and said, let's go talk to these people. So there was a very flexible, fast-moving, responsive agency that was focused on economic development. We passed all, tax, regulatory. We started Texas on this trajectory from making the state competitive. And we also created that enterprise fund that basically is a tool, a deal closing fund, where when, well, the biggest one that you read about lately, when Toyota North American moved their operation from Torrance, California to Plano, Texas, there was some enterprise fund money that helped them make that move. And again, that's a 10th Amendment thing. If states don't want to have that type of program, that's their call. But they're probably going to be at a disadvantage. Maybe, from my perspective, they would be. So anyway, we did all those things. A year and a half after the Chicago choice was announced, we heard through very well-placed sources that the reason, or one of the strong reasons they chose Chicago over Dallas-Fort Worth, was the spouses of the decision makers didn't think the cultural arts were as expansive in Dallas-Fort Worth as Chicago. Now, I'm not going to argue whether in 2001 that is correct or not. What I'm going to tell you is that was the perception, and perception was reality. And that had a very, very influential impact on the decision to pick Chicago rather than Dallas-Fort Worth. So, fast forward with me a decade to 2011. During that period of time, Fort Worth, Texas built a new museum of modern art. The Bass has built one of the finest symphony halls in the world. The Kimball Museum has expanded by a substantial amount. Fort Worth developed one of the great zoos in America. Dallas built 2 performing arts facilities in that period of time, AT&T and Meyerson. National Sculpture Gardens relocated to Dallas. American Film Institute moved out of California to Dallas. Just within the last year, the Perot's have finished one of the really fine museums of natural science in this country. And Dallas created the largest geographical cultural arts district in America, 68 acres. Austin, a little government university town I live in, built a new performing arts facility. They built a new museum of modern art. The Zachary Scott Theater expanded substantially in that period of time. The largest film and music festival in the world, South by Southwest, occurs there every fall. And the United States Grand Prix, the only Formula One race in the United States, is in Austin, Texas. San Antonio is building a new performing arts facility as we speak. And tonight, in Houston, Texas, there are more theater seats available than any other city in America outside of New York City. That happened in a decade. And it happened because of exactly the principle which you talk about. The private sector was able to keep more of what they worked for. And they made the right decision about where to invest it. And they have invested substantially in the cultural arts. So I know this is taking long, but this is funny. This is the best. this is the rest of the story. This is all part of it. So, in February of 2011, I was on the deck of the USS Reagan, observing their carrier operations, just off the coast of San Diego before they departed for the Indian Ocean. And a distinguished visitor aircraft landed, and people were getting off. And I recognized, when he took his little helmet off, Bill Condon, who was the head of Boeing while we were doing these negotiations. I followed him into the hangar bay where we could talk, and he introduced myself to him, and I substantially shorter period of time than what it's taken me to tell you this. I made that relationship about them picking Chicago rather than Dallas-Fort Worth, and that, you know, spouses of decision makers hold the cultural arts. And he got a big smile on his face. He said, he said, you're correct. He said that had a very substantive impact on our decision-making process. And I said, thought this came to me. I said, where are you living, Mr. Condon? Because I'd lost touch with him. I had no idea. And he got a really big smile on his face. He said, Frisco, Texas. Frisco, Texas is basically a suburb of Dallas. So Mrs. Condon, if she was one of those, which I suspect she was, has decided cultural arts are good enough and expansive enough for her taste now. And Phil Condon gets to keep more of his money. So,
I just wanted to know how much the state invested in trying to attract more cultural arts, get more cultural arts, or was it purely private enterprise that did it through philanthropy, like I heard a bunch of rich names? Yeah, did the state
for the arts?
Yeah, did the state incentivize a lot of that with grants and whatnot we always hear about?
Now, there's probably at the local level some dollars in some of these projects, but I can't tell you, to my recollection, any state dollars that went towards those. This is almost all, and again, there's probably some tax breaks, would be my bet, at the local level, but there's no state dollars.
Sweet.
Which is the beauty of this, and my point is that if you really care about that aspect of quality of life, which I think, listen, when we were talking to the folks at Toyota, when we were talking to the headquarters of Oxy Chemical, that big old building that had been in downtown LA since Arm & Hammer, I guess, built it whenever, the cultural arts are part of the pitch. Because when you're talking about the corporate executives and their families, and for that matter, mid-level executives and their families, or for that matter, a line worker at a Toyota manufacturing facility, we talk to them about the cultural arts as being a part of the quality of life that they're going to want, and that we hope that they will engage with. Every Toyota pickup manufactured in the United States now is in San Antonio, Texas. They closed down that facility in California, moved it to, and this can happen in any state. But you got to have tax policy, predictability in the regulatory climate. You can't allow the trial bar to sue willy-nilly. You got to have those protections against oversuing. You got to have a skilled workforce. So, when Facebook and eBay, we passed. How big is that Facebook facility y'all are building out there? It's like 1-point-something million square feet, right? Facebook is a very, very intuitive company. And they didn't move here if they had a question about the long-term ability to staff skilled workforce. They've done their homework. They think you're going to win.
I guess to close up here, just want to thank Governor Perry for coming out and for the support he has for all of our candidates, and thank you all for being here. And I think there's more food if you have time. Otherwise, thanks a lot.
Yeah.